Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Alexey, and today I have a special guest, Lawrence Mackrory. Lawrence is a metal sound engineer from Sweden, who has been working with such metal bands as Bloodbath, Decapitated, Meshuggah, Vomitory, and many more. Also, Lawrence has a metal mixing course on Nails the Mix, where he shows how he mixed death metal song, which is called Zombie Inferno by Bloodbath. So, if you want to learn how to produce, mix and master metal music, you can always join Nails the Mix. All the links will be in the info box of this video. It's a huge honor to have you on my YouTube channel today, Lawrence. And let's start our interview. So my first question is, how Bloodbath Zombie Inferno song was recorded?
Well, it was recorded in different steps. First, the drummer Martin Axenroth recorded the drums at his own home studio, which is basically just a small normal room in a house. And then when that was done, he sent me the files, and I did some drum editing, and then they recorded the guitars and bass in Stockholm in a rehearsal studio. Is where they tracked the DIs for the guitars and the bass. And then I added that to my mix. And then later on, when the vocalist Nick was able to come to Stockholm to record, we spent a week down in a studio in Stockholm where we just tracked all the vocals with the whole band, present, and we just had fun. So it was a bit of a drawn out process, but not too bad. It was like during most part of a year, basically, maybe like 8 months or something. And so that's how the whole album was recorded. Then I got everything and I started to work on it and reamping and all that stuff. But yeah, that's how the recording.
How do you usually start your mixes? Do you use mix templates?
I do, yes. And but it's just that comes from many years of just as soon as I understood that I'm almost always using the same routing or the same effects and the same style of mixing. I figured out, why don't I just save this template and I start there next session. So I have always some things that I almost always do. I always route my all my tracks the same way. So that's in my template. Then I know I'm always going to use that EQ and that compressor. So I always have them on already. Maybe I don't use them, but probably I will, So it's my template is kind of an overall kind of a basic. I mean, you can't play a song through it and it sounds like a mix. No, that's not how it works for me. I have to tweak the mix, but all these boring stuff that you do, you route and you create a new aux and all that stuff, that just takes up so much time. So I just have that ready. So all I have to do is import the files and just send them to the right outputs, and I'm ready to start mixing just straight off.
What is your opinion on gain staging? Do you do gain staging?
Yeah, I don't consider it as like a separate stage that, okay, now I'm going to take care of gain staging, but it's just something that is, and I've never actually thought about gain staging. It's just something that I figured out automatically. No, but when I had mixed maybe, 4 or 5 albums before I even heard somebody speak about gain staging. It's just like something that was natural to me because I went to audio school and everything many years back. It's just like you don't clip stuff. You don't make it red. You make sure you have a little bit of headroom everywhere. So if I'm going into a plugin, I'm making sure that I'm not overshooting that and so forth. So gain staging, I guess it's just part of my workflow. So I don't really think about it, but I try to. And obviously, when I have my template, I always know like where I need the meters to be on all the auxes and all on the master bus. So I'm never too loud. I always know kind of where I am. So gain staging is kind of built into my process, basically.
So my next question is how to mix death metal. Should you start with drums, vocals, or guitars?
I understand. It can. Some people do it differently and depending on what kind of music it is. But I don't. I do the same way, basically. It doesn't matter what I'm working on, because it's the same process for me. If I'm doing like something that is jazz or lo-fi acoustic rock or something, folk music, I start with the drums. But I mean, sometimes I might start with the overheads in the rooms. If I know that's a big part of the music, I want to hear what that sounds like first. And then when I'm doing metal or death metal, I might start with the kick and snare and just check out that first. But it's always the drums. But I mean, I don't know if you saw my Nail the Mix on Bloodbath, but I usually just start with the full mix. I just take all the faders up and listen to what they listen like, and I do some balancing, some quick balancing, just to kind of to get a mix going in like 10-15 minutes. Because then after that, then I can mute everything and start working on the drums that I work with. Because if I'm working on the drums and I want to hear, the rest, okay, what is this? What's happening here? Then I can just turn on the guitars and bass and vocals, and I can hear them well, as they should be in a song. And then I can mute them again and start working. So that's why I think it's cool to just do a rough mix the first thing you do. So that's what I do. But I don't do anything differently if it's death metal or traditional metal or hardcore or whatever. I work the same way, basically.
When you are mixing for your clients, do you use reference tracks?
Oh, yeah. I do. Towards the very end, when I'm kind of like in the final stage of mixing, and if I'm I'm kind of in the mastering stage as well, I just want to listen to some tracks that I know sound really good. And there's like a couple of songs that I have mixed, and there's like 4 or 5 tracks that I really like. That's some other production. And I just listen to them through, and I listen to them, and I switch between them, just to wash my mix out of my head. You just wash it out. You listen to other stuff, and then I just go back to my mix. And if it stands out in any way, I know it's kind of, I need to look at something, because you get so used to your mix that you can think that, oh, this sounds awesome. And then you compare it and it's, something might be way off, because you get blinded as you have tunnel vision when you're working. So that's how I use reference tracks. Sometimes I might use reference tracks even more. If a band says, we really, really like this production and we like how the bass sounds and that, then I will look closely at those reference tracks and see, okay, this must be how they did that. Maybe I should try something like that, So, but otherwise, I just do it to make sure that I'm kind of in the same ballpark as those tracks that I like to listen to.
How to sit death metal vocals in the mix?
Well, yeah, to make them sit right in the mix. For me, I like to have my vocals up front and audible. It doesn't matter if it's thrash, death, or heavy metal, or whatever music. I like the vocals to sit a little bit on top of the mix, and I want you to be able to hear everything. Even if it's death metal, a lot of people still listen to the vocals, especially people who aren't musicians and producers. They listen to the vocals. They might think like the drums and guitars are cool, but they don't really listen to that. That's for musicians. So they hear the vocals, and that's what they're the main thing they're listening to. So that it needs to be front and center and audible all the way. So I don't really do anything differently on where I sit them. I just, for me, it's a balance between guitars and vocals and making sure that they play well together. And so one thing that I'll do is I'll have like a side chain that ducks all the frequencies from the vocals. It will take those frequencies and duck them on the guitars while the vocals are are singing or growling. And I use track spacer for that, which is really good because then every time the vocal comes in, those frequencies that the vocals have will just duck down a little bit on the guitars, which makes sure that those frequencies stay kind of even throughout the mix. Nothing pokes out and gets too harsh, you know. So that's my approach to vocals in death metal.
If we talk about parallel processing, so in this case, do you use parallel compression and parallel distortion? When and where do you use parallel compression, and when and where do you use parallel distortion?
I use both. I use parallel compression usually when I want to have more smack and attack in something, and I basically only do it in drums, on drums. What I like to, do a over the top, overdriven, smacky drum sound where you just hear like the wet transients and it's really violent sounding, and the attack of the drums is poking out. So I'll make that sound and then I'll blend it in, just to bring a little more excitement to the drums. And when I use parallel saturation or distortion, is basically just to wake something up. If I feel something sounds flat or dead and it needs a little bit more life, some harmonic distortion, I will add that. And you usually can't have like 100% of that. You just want to blend it. So that's why parallel is good for that. And I usually just do it on, if a plugin has a mix setting, I'll use that and make sure, just dial in a good, nice distortion that I like the sound of, then back it off and just use the mix knob,
How do you create brutal metal guitar tones?
I love brutal guitar, tones. And so I guess I'm only looking for something that I like, that I enjoy listening to, because I like them to be brutal and I like them to have a lot of gain, and I want the notes to really like howl and be really, aggressive sounding, but it can't hurt your ears. It has to be nice and balanced and smooth. Otherwise, you can't listen to a full album. At least not me. I'm older. My ears know what they like, and if I'm gonna listen to a full album, it has to sound nice and soft, but also brutal. So it's kind of a it's when doing brutal music, it's always that's always the thing for me. It needs to be it can't be fatiguing to the ears, and the guitars are usually the main reason why something can sound fatiguing in metal, because the guitars are too harsh maybe, or so I just usually just try something. I'll usually just start, maybe I'll start with some plugins and see if I can do it that way, because that's easier. Sometimes I don't have to reamp something in real time, but usually I end up just doing just trying my pedals and my amps and my combinations of that, and then just finding something cool and yeah, that's it. I'll just go down the rabbit hole and just spend like a full day just trying to get a cool guitar sound.
How to be sure that my mix sounds good on every device?
There's many ways to do that if you're unsure. I feel that when something sounds really good here, I'm ready to take it to my AirPods Pro. I love how these sounds. I love how my mixes and the mixes that I enjoy listening to, they sound great in these. So I listen to these, and I listen in my car is old, it's shitty, but my girlfriend has a nice sound in her car, so I'll go for a ride in her car and listen there. I don't need more than 2 different sources to know that this is translating well, and it's usually 100% the low end. Is it good? Is it too much? Does the kick have too much? Does the bass have too much? So that's basically the only thing that I figure out, because when you get in a car that has like a normal sound system, it's usually a lot of bass. And you like to have a lot of bass when you're in the car. So that usually tells you if you're on the right track when it comes to the low end. But I mean, most of the time, if I'm happy with it in my studio, it's going to sound good everywhere. But if you're unsure, the best thing is to listen to a lot of different listen in a lot of different ways and different speakers and headphones, and listen to make sure that you like the sound in that source first, in those headphones or in that car or whatever it is. And then you listen to albums that you like, and then you listen to your mix. And that's just keep doing that until you're sure that it translates well. I mean, you can do lots of different things. You can look at reference tracks in a frequency analyzer and also see that you might be on the right track. But I mean, there's a lot of tools. You just have to figure it out, I guess.
How to create a good low end in a death metal song?
I think it's to make sure that the bass guitar has a nice, full, steady sub, and that the notes are always audible, that the lower mids and the lows are very even and nice. If they're not very even, if you get a DI track that is really bad, you might have to actually just, if there's no other option, you have to kind of program a bass and figure out how they're playing and program like a low end. So you have a nice low end. Then you can use the actual recorded bass for the mids and the highs. You can combine them. I've actually done that on plenty of stuff. It was a long time ago now, but now I usually tell the bands, send me the DI first so I can hear it first, make sure it's good. Yeah. But anyway, you need to make sure that low end is nice, and then you need to make sure that the kick cuts through all the time, and that it's not too much of the low end in the kick, because there's a lot of fast kicks going on in death metal, and you need to make sure it doesn't build up with a lot of bass frequencies. So making sure that it's playing nice with the sub and it's not poking out too much. And when you have that perfectly, listen to the fast kick parts and make sure that you kind of automate down some low end when it's really fast playing. And especially if you're using a lot of samples, it's going to get way too much, If it's natural kicks, it's a little bit easier to mix because the playing style automatically makes it a little bit more dynamic. So I guess that's the things to look for in the low end.
What tips can you give on recording death metal vocals?
I would say first off, this mic, the one that you have an SM7B, right?
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah.
Those are really good because the vocalist can get really close to it and it will still sound, it can take a lot of beating. It's good for death metal. But I mean, I think make sure that the singer is very consistent and because every growler or, extreme metal singer has their own style. Some can be really loud and some can be really quiet. It can sound awesome and still be, very quiet. So I guess, this mic is really good if you're singing really aggressive, really loud. But then again, any good vocal mic, I think, is good to record. It all depends on the singer's voice. Some of them have very sharp S's, and some have a lot of air. Some have a lot of throaty sounds. You just have to try it out. I'm usually 9 times out of 10, this mic will do the trick. But as with Bloodbath, I used the U87. It just fit a lot better on Nick's voice. So it's just a matter of what kind of singer you have. But make sure they always sing consistently and evenly and with power. Because if if the performance is good, you cannot fail when it comes to the mixing. That's the way I see it. The only time the mixing is bad is if you don't know how to mix, of course, but if the performance is bad, because it's sometimes very hard to drums you can replace, and bad guitar sounds you can reamp, but a vocal, if that's bad, you can't really do that much to it if it's bad performance. So make sure the performance is and spend a lot of time on the vocals. Make sure they're tight, tight to the rhythm, and that's it. A good performance is what I'll say.
And my final question is, how do you prepare your mixes for mastering?
I will do a lot of mastering tweaks as I'm getting closer to the end of a mix, if I'm mastering the mix as well. And so I kind of have my own mixes are kind of the same, always kind of in the same loudness and same dynamic range. And that's the way I like them for the mix. To have some dynamics left. I know a lot of mixers that don't master. They still do a lot of kind of mastering things on the master bus, and some compression and saturation, and that's all fine as long as there's some dynamics left, because a mastering engineer cannot work, shouldn't have to work, on a track that is already limited, because you can't do anything. Everything you do on a track that's really hard limited, it's just gonna basically make it worse. You kind of have to unmaster it a little bit if you want to add your own stuff to it. So I would say make sure it's not too processed. It shouldn't sound like a finished mix on Spotify or whatever you're listening to. It shouldn't sound like a finished record. It should have some dynamics, and it should have, maybe a little bit more low end than high end, and don't overcook the mix. If you use a lot of stuff while you're mixing, fine, but then turn it off. Make sure only the important stuff is on the actual mix. Like I said, if you have a compression that kind of like a master bus compressor that gives the whole song kind of a vibe and a push, then that's perfect. But don't do like hard limiting and clipping on the mix.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful interview. It was a huge honor talking to you.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Alexei. Good to be here.